So with the addition of the 3.7 update, there was also an update to the Stellar Companion Spirit shop with the addition of Topaz. And so today I wanted to create an updated build guide for 3.7 Topaz just for the people who may have picked her or maybe want to see if there's anything updated for her. If you're curious on if you should or not pick her in the actual shop with the free thing they did give us, I have a video you can already check out from the info box, like right around here or something. But yes, today I'm going to take you over her kit and eidolons, best Lightcones, best relic sets, the relic sets you want to run, and some basic team building ideas. So starting it off with her actual kit, so Topaz is a hunt and fire character. Her basic attack will deal fire damage based off her attack to a designated enemy. Her skill inflicts a designated enemy target with proof of death, which will increase their follow-up attack damage taken by 50%. You can only inflict proof of death on one enemy target, and that's going to be the most recent inflicted target. If there's no one inflicted with proof of death in the actual field, Topaz randomly will inflict one with proof of death. Numby deals fire damage based off Topaz's attack to a designated target, and using skill to deal damage will be considered launching a follow-up attack. Her ultimate will let Numby enter the Windfall Bonanza state, and the damage multiplier will increase by 150% and crit damage will increase by 25%. Also, when enemies with proof of death are hit by ally basic attack, skill, or ultimate, Numby's action is advanced forward by 50%, and the enhanced state will be exited when using 2 charges. So 2 Numby spins will consume it, using a skill counts as 1, and just Numby acting on its own will count as 1 as well. Her talent summons Numby at the start of battle, who has a fixed 80 speed by default. When taking action, Numby will launch a follow-up attack on an enemy target that is afflicted with proof of death, which will deal fire damage based off Topaz's attack. When enemies with proof of death receive an ally target's follow-up attack, Numby's action is advanced forward by 50%. The action advance forward effect cannot be triggered during Numby's own turn, and when Topaz is downed, Numby will disappear. Her technique summons Numby when Topaz enters the overworld, which will automatically look for basic treasures and trotters in a set radius. Using her technique regenerates 60 energy for Topaz after Numby's first attack in the next battle. If Topaz is still on the team after using her technique, defeating overworld enemies will grant a small amount of bonus credits earned, and you can get a maximum of 10,000 per calendar day. Using it in one of the universe modes will additionally receive a small amount of cosmic fragments with a small chance to obtain a random curio. For her bonus traces, her A2 will let her basic attack be considered a follow-up attack. Her A4 will increase Topaz and Numby's damage dealt to enemies with fire weakness by 15%. And her A6 will be for when Numby uses an attack while in the enhanced state from the ultimate. Topaz will additionally regenerate 10 energy. For her eidolons, her E1 will allow an additional debuff state called the Debtor state, which will be afflicted on enemies who do have proof of death, and this can take effect only once within a single attack. Debtor state will increase the crit damage of follow-up attacks dealt to that enemy target by 25%, that stacks up to 2 times, and removing the proof of death state will also remove the Debtor state. So now, additionally with the 25% increased follow-up damage from her skill with the proof of death state, you can now inflict Debtor 2 times, giving them up to a 50% increase from follow-up attack crit damage. Her E2, after Numby takes action and launches an attack, will regenerate 5 energy for Topaz. Her E4 will advance Topaz's action by 20% after Numby's turn begins. And her E6 will increase Numby's attack count in the enhanced state from the ultimate. So instead of 2, you will now have 3. And also the fire res pen for it increases by 10% when it attacks. Now when taking a look at what Lightcone you want to use, unfortunately Topaz hasn't really received too many more options, there's only been about like 1 more. So her Lightcone options are relatively the same, with her best in slot being none other than her signature Lightcone to this day, which does increase the wearer's crit rate by 18% and increases damage dealt by follow-up attacks by 30%. After the wearer uses a follow-up attack, inflicts the target with the tame state for 2 times. When allies hit enemy targets under the tame state, each tame stack will increase the crit damage dealt by 12%. Topaz hits a lot, so the fact this Lightcone does give you a crit rate increase rather than something like crit damage is really good, since you want to get as close as 100% as possible for a character that hits so many times. And practically all her actual damage comes from follow-up attack sources, so the increase to follow-up attack damage is really good. Topaz's role is also mainly being a sub DPS that also increases damage to enemies by follow-up attack damage. So increasing sources from any other follow-up source on the team, so Aventurian follow-up attack, Facial follow-up attack, Facial ultimate, Dr. Ratio Chalk. And this Lightcone is actually good for that as well, increasing the crit damage dealt to that enemy target, which is not only good for follow-up attacks, but all sources of damage. It gives you up to a 24% increase to crit damage dealt to those enemy targets, so you're making them take more follow-up attack crit damage if you have the E1, 50% base with proof of death, when it comes to follow-up attack damage, and if you have this Lightcone, it's an additional up to 24% crit damage dealt to those enemies. So any crit forms are going to do more damage to those enemies, which further amplifies her role and makes this her best in slot. Another good option on her is the Herda Shop Lightcone, providing 8% increase to the wearer for crit rate and an additional 8% when attacking enemies who have 50% or less percentage of HP. When the wearer defeats an enemy target, their attack is increased by 20% for 2 turns, and at S5 it's a 16% increase to crit rate for both values and a 40% increase to attack. So this is really good just because the crit rate increase is almost as good as her signature, and attacking enemies that have 50% or lower HP will be much higher than her signature, so that's really good for her overall crit potential. The last part, back then, was really good because Topaz was able to kill since enemies didn't have as much HP and res as they do now. But nowadays, getting this last part might be a bit difficult, and not activating this might actually decrease the value of this actual 5-star Lightcone by a good amount. But when you are able to activate it, it actually does quite some good stuff for her damage, since 40% attack on someone like Topaz is really good. So for the crit rate alone, it's already valuable, but if you are able to activate the attack percent, it's even more valuable, but overall, still a good option to use. Another option you can use is Swordplay, which for each time the wearer attacks the same target, damage dealt increases by 8% up to 5 times, and will be dispelled when the wearer changes targets, and at S5, it's a 16% increase to damage dealt. Numby hits a lot of times, enough to stack up this Lightcone right away, so as long as you're not constantly switching targets, which you really don't in single target / follow-up teams anyways, that makes this Lightcone actually really valuable on her since she gets a massive increase to damage dealt. It's up to an 80% increase to damage dealt against that one enemy target, which you will be able to keep until you dispel the actual effect by changing targets, which, again, you inflict the debuffs onto enemies anyways, you focus down that enemy, and once you switch, you can stack it up right away, because Numby hits a lot of times. Which is why Topaz is able to utilize this Lightcone really well. Another one you can use is the newer Battle Pass Lightcone See You at the End, which increases the wearer's crit damage by 24%. The skill damage and follow-up attack damaged by the wearer will increase by 24% as well. And at S5, it's a 40% increase to both values. Crit damage is a bit less desired since, again, you want to get as much crit rate as possible, but if you are able to build up healthy crit rate without a Lightcone, it becomes that much better, since it's just going to make Topaz do more damage anytime she crits. You ignore the skill damage part since she doesn't do that, all her damage is follow-up attack anyways, so 40% crit damage and 40% increase to her main source of damage being follow-up attack damage, which actually allows her to utilize this Lightcone pretty well. Another option is the Final Victor Lightcone, which increases the wearer's attack by 12%. When the wearer lands a crit hit on enemies, gains a stack of good fortune and will stack up to 4 times. Each stack of good fortune increases the wearer's crit damage by 8% and will be removed at the end of the wearer's turn. S5 makes it a 20% increase to attack with a 12% increase to crit damage. Attack increase is just going to increase her overall sources of damage. Doesn't provide any crit rate unfortunately, but it does provide you up to a 48% increase to crit damage. And all you have to do is land crits on an enemy, so assuming your Numby attacks do all crit, you're able to stack this up very well. And then the next time you attack with Topaz, at the end of that, it's going to reset, but the Numby can restack it up right away, so she's actually able to utilize this very well, thanks to the fact that Numby attacks a lot and the way she works with a summon, quote-unquote. Now for Relic sets, unfortunately, just like Lightcones, there still hasn't really been any change, so our best in slot is still overall the 4-piece Ash Blazing Grand Duke set, which 2-piece increases the damage dealt by follow-up attacks by 20%. 4-piece after the wearer uses a follow-up attack increases the wearer's attack by 6% for every time the follow-up attack deals damage. The effect can stack up to 8 times and last for 3 turns, and the effect is removed the next time the wearer uses a follow-up attack. 2-piece is just going to increase practically every main source of damage she does have, her basic attack, since it's considered a follow-up attack, and then her actual follow-up attacks with Numby. And the 4-piece actually is stackable with her since Numby hits so many times, so she is able to fully utilize this. So every hit of Numby when it is spinning will do one more, and more, and then more, and then more, so it's really just really easy stack. And she is one of the very few characters that can fully utilize the set. And so overall, the 4-piece Ash Blazing Grand Duke set is still her best in slot. Another option, which depends on your team and your investment and such, would be the 4-piece Pioneer set, with the 2-piece increasing damage dealt to enemies with debuffs by 12%. 4-piece increases the wearer's crit rate by 4%. The wearer deals 8%/12% increased crit damage to enemy targets with at least 2/3 debuffs. After the wearer inflicts a debuff on an enemy target, the aforementioned effects increase by 100% for 1 turn. Topaz does have a debuff in her kit with Proof of Depth, so you are able to always have the 2-piece active, and you are also able to proc the aforementioned effects increase. But again, this set will depend on your value. If you don't have a team, let's say everyone's E0 S0 and you can't get full debuffs on enemy targets, then you don't want to use it just because you're not going to be able to proc the full effect. But let's say you have Topaz, maybe you have her E1 for another debuff, you have her actual Lightcone for another debuff, you're able to do it with her alone. If you have Aventurian on the team, he gives one debuff as well, his Lightcone can give one, his E2, whatever, Dr. Ratio on the team, so on and so forth. You just want to make sure the team you are running her on has enough debuffs to proc the full effect, where Topaz can proc it for her best damage. And if you can, it is a really good set to use on her. Past those, it is 2-piece, so you have a lot of options you can really use. They're all relatively the same. So you can do 2-piece Scholar with 2-piece Wave Strider for crit rate and crit damage, or you can do 2-piece of one of those with 2-piece World Remaking, which is also 8% crit rate, or you can combine 2-piece of any of the crit sets with 2-piece attack percent increasing sets, so Wind Soaring set, Hero set, Prisoner set, or Musketeers, or 2-piece any of those with 2-piece Firesmith for fire damage increase. For Planar Ornaments, her best in slot is still the Durance set. When an ally uses a follow-up attack, the wearer gains a stack of merit stacking up to 5 times. Each stack of merit increases the damage dealt by the wearer's follow-up attacks by 5%. When there are 5 stacks, additionally increases the wearer's crit damage by 25%. Stacking up the actual merit stacks is super easy with her since you only run her on follow-up teams anyways. And she herself attacks a lot, so Numby output the basic attack considering a follow-up attack, she can get a lot of stacks herself, but she does want external help to stack it up as soon as possible. Once you reach 5 stacks, you have a total of 25% increase to follow-up attack damage, while also gaining a 25% increase to crit damage, which overall is the best for her own damage, making this her best in slot. You can also use Banan Amusement, which increases the wearer's crit damage by 16%. When a target summoned by the wearer is on the field, crit damage additionally increases by 32%. So it just becomes a free 48% increase to crit damage as Numbies on the field counts as a summon, so it really just is a free 48% increase to crit damage. More crit damage than Duran, but the follow-up attack damage dealt does make that set better, but Banan Amusement is still really good to use. You can also use Yzma on her as you're always pairing her with either Ratio or Feisha, who are both Hunt characters, and Topaz is Hunt, so it adds up. Increases the wearer's attack by 12%. When entering battle, if at least one teammate follows the same path as the wearer, then the wearer's crit rate increases by 12%. So it really just is a free 12% attack increase and a free 12% crit rate increase. And as I mentioned, crit rate is very valuable on her. So this helps you get closer to 100%, which does make it valuable, and the 12% attack will increase all sources of damage she does have. You also can use Inert Salsado, which does provide the wearer 8% crit rate. When the wearer's crit rate reaches 50% or higher, damage dealt by the wearer's ultimate and follow-up attack increases by 15%. Free 8% crit rate, 50% or higher crit rate should not be a hard ask, as you want to have way more than that, 90, 95, 100%. And then it becomes a free, you just ignore the ultimate damage, a free increase to follow-up attack damage. Again, her main source of damage with 15% increase to it. So, again, it enhances her basic attack as that's considered a follow-up attack, and then Numby's follow-up attacks whether enhanced or not. For the main sets, you want to run on the relics. For the body, you want to run mainly crit rate, but if you have really good crit rate rolls and you're close to 100% without it, you can run crit damage, but for most people, it's going to be crit rate. For the V, you want to run speed. For the orb, you can do fire damage or attack percent. Fire damage is better, but if you have a really good attack percent orb, feel free to run it. And for the link rope, you want to run attack percent. For the substats, first, really just get as much speed as you can. Nowadays, it's less to focus on Topaz's damage since she is a sub DPS, but her DPS as a sub DPS is still not that great. So it mainly became a point to focus on as much speed as possible. You still want to get good offensive stats to get as much of that extra damage you can do. But speed, getting it to like hyper speed and above is exceptionally great for applying debuffs, switching targets when you need to, or especially giving more stacks to someone like Feisha. So first, prioritize just as much speed as possible. If you can get to hyperspeed and above, that's going to be really good. Then it's your generic crit rate, crit damage, attack percent. So for crit rate, get it closest to 100% as possible, especially if you're running Final Victor as a free-to-play option, since you'll need to crit all those hits to get the full value. Getting as much crit damage and attack percent will be good as well, just so you can actually do as much damage as you can. Even though it's not that high as opposed to nowadays standards, getting as much as you can is never going to hurt. Now the team building section here is going to be very, very short because there is 2 characters that she works with and you really want to run her nowhere else. That is, of course, the follow-up team. That is the only team she is on, so the team is going to be Topaz, Feisha, or Ratio, but I'm going to use Feisha as an example here first. The support slot usually always goes to Robin. Robin is great on this team. Robin is fantastic for Feisha. And also really good with Topaz since she is buffing both of them simultaneously, and your sustain slot for this team is usually always Aventurian as well. So the follow-up team looks like this with Topaz. And if you're running Ratio, you change Feisha for Ratio. If I can find him, there he is. So for the Ratio team, it would look like this. Now if you don't have Robin or Aventurian or both, you just sub out for who you do have. So for Robin, AoE buffers are better on this team since you have Topaz trying to do as much damage as possible, and then Ratio or Feisha wanting the buffs from them as well. Robin is very, very valuable on these teams, and they both lose a lot of value if you don't have her. But you could use Ron May if you really want to forego not buffing Topaz at all. You can use a single threat buffer such as Sunday or even Sparkle or whatever you have. They're not going to be nearly as good as running Robin, but it's still fine. You can still use someone like Tribby as well. She works fine on those teams. So those would be your sub options. And then for Venturine, it really just goes to your best sustain that's available. A very competitive sustain on this team against Venturine is actually Hyacine. Hyacine sustains very well and can help you with some decent damage output, especially with AoE buffers. Lingsha actually does work relatively well on this team as well, and she has a follow-up attack, so Fei Xiao teams would get a better output when it comes to it. Especially if you have something like E2 Fei Xiao as well, so she can give her a full stack as opposed to one, so Lingsha works there as well. And you can also use someone like Danheng Preventer Terre, as his buffs is going to be good for both Ratio and Fei Xiao, and he also sustains the team very, very well. And that is the full updated Topaz guide as of the 3.7 update. Yeah, there's not really much that has changed, but I did want to make it just for people who may be unaware. But if you did enjoy or found this video helpful, dropping a like would be greatly appreciated. If you're new to the channel or haven't done so already, be sure to subscribe and turn the bell icon for future videos like this along with all other types of style content. Check the description to join the Discord server and my Archetypes channel, and see you later. Peace out.